To find a man who loved her for who she was, not what she had to pretend her body was broken. This is the story of a beautiful, wealthy woman who faked a disability and the one man who threatened to expose her by truly loving her. Isabelle Lancaster lived in a penthouse that touched the clouds, a modern fortress of glass and steel overlooking a city that sparkled like diamonds. From the outside, her life looked like a fairy tale. As the sole heiress to the Lancaster global tech empire, her days were a blur of charity galas, board meetings she tuned out, and lunches with people whose names she'd forget the second they stood up. Her nights were even emptier, filled with an endless parade of handsome, charming men who all looked at her with the same hungry eyes. They saw the Lancaster name, the billion-dollar trust fund, and a face from magazine covers. They saw a prize to be won, but they never, ever saw her. At one lavish party, a man named Julian, with a slick smile and a watch worth more than a car, held her hand and told her she looked breathtaking, commenting that her dress must have cost a fortune. He went on, telling her that his father was ecstatic about them. He called a potential Lancaster-Sterling merger the deal of the decade, and them a true power couple. Isabel's smile faltered. He wasn't talking about them. He was talking about a merger. He wasn't picturing a life with her. He was picturing a headline in the financial news. The hollowness in her chest grew into that familiar, painful ache. Later that night, alone in her vast, silent apartment, she looked in the mirror. She saw the perfect makeup, the designer gown, the diamond earrings glittering like frozen tears. The woman staring back was a stranger, a beautifully decorated doll on a shelf. She thought about her 25th birthday just a few months ago. A man she'd been dating for 6 months had proposed. He'd gotten down on one knee with a diamond so big it looked obscene, and for a foolish second her heart had fluttered with hope. Then he'd said the words she would never forget. "Think of the influence we'll have. Your beauty and my ambition will be unstoppable." He never once mentioned love. That was the moment something inside Isabelle snapped. The hope she'd been clinging to dissolved, leaving a cold, hard cynicism. She was tired of the performance, tired of the golden cage. She wanted to be seen, truly seen, and in that quiet desperation, a radical, dangerous idea started to form. What if she could strip it all away? What if she could become someone who had nothing to offer on the surface? Someone broken? The idea became an obsession. If men only wanted her for her perfect exterior, she'd give them an imperfect one. If they only wanted her for her money, she'd pretend she had none. She'd run an experiment to see if a single person could love her for her mind, her humor, her heart, for her soul. Her best friend, Clara, was horrified. Sitting in Isabel's minimalist kitchen, panic on her face, she pleaded with her. She called the plan to pretend to be disabled not an experiment, but insane and offensive. But Isabel's mind was made up. She explained that it was the only way she could know if she was a person worthy of love on her own. She laid out her plan. She would move out of the city, rent a small, simple apartment as Bella, and claim she'd been in an accident, receiving a settlement just large enough to live on. Clara warned her that the idea was terrible. She asked what would happen if Isabelle actually met someone, telling her she couldn't build a relationship on a massive lie, that it would destroy them both. But the pain of Isabel's loneliness was bigger than her fear. She spent weeks crafting her new identity. She leased a modest ground-floor apartment in a quiet suburb 2 hours away. She sold her designer wardrobe, replacing it with simple clothes. The hardest part was the wheelchair. Sitting in it for the first time in her empty new apartment felt morally heavy. She practiced moving around the small space, the rubber wheels silent on the floor. She researched the challenges people with real mobility issues faced, learning about a world that wasn't designed for everyone. A pang of guilt hit her, but she pushed it down, telling herself it was for a good cause. It was for the truth. Looking in the mirror, the glamorous heiress was gone. In her place was Bella, a woman with a quiet sadness in her eyes, whose life had been forever changed by a tragedy that never happened. The lie was complete. Now the test could begin. The first few weeks as Bella were a harsh dose of reality. The world was not kind. Simple tasks became huge challenges, but even more jarring were the people. They either ignored her, their eyes sliding right past as if she were invisible, or they stared with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. She decided to test the dating world with a simple profile, her picture clearly showing the wheelchair. The responses were a masterclass in superficiality. Her first date was Mark, a gym owner who couldn't stop talking about physical perfection. He told her it was a real shame what happened to her, that she must have been a knockout before, He believed the body was a temple that had to be maintained, and looked at her chair with open disdain. He didn't ask her a single question. Her second date with a financial advisor named Kevin was even worse. He immediately asked if her car accident came with a pretty hefty settlement. He saw a potential client, explaining that his firm could really make that money work for her. His eyes lit up not when she smiled, but when he imagined his commission. A third man, a self-proclaimed spiritual guru, treated her like a project, telling her in a slow, patronizing voice that her physical limits were a spiritual gift. He even put a hand on her shoulder, claiming he could help her heal with meditative energy. Each date was a new wound, proving her deepest fears right. They didn't see Bella. They saw a broken toy, a bank account, or a charity case. Clara's warnings echoed in her ears, but the pain just proved her experiment was working. Her heart grew colder, her cynicism hardening into a shield. She was about to give up, convinced that a true connection was a fairy tale. And then she met Leo. It happened on a Tuesday at the local library. Isabelle was trying to reach a book on a high shelf, a poetry collection she loved. As she stretched in frustration, a man suddenly stood beside her. He wasn't movie star handsome, but he had kind eyes and a genuine warmth. There was sawdust on his jeans, and his hands were calloused from honest work. He asked if she needed a hand. Startled, she thanked him and pointed to the book. He reached up and grabbed it, but he didn't just hand it down to her. He knelt, so they were at eye level. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. No one had ever done that. He recognized the book's author, Walt Whitman, and quoted one of his lines, "Keep your face always towards the sunshine, and shadows will fall behind you." Surprised, she learned he was a carpenter named Leo, who felt a kinship with people who build things with words. She introduced herself as Bella. He smiled, and his whole face lit up. He wasn't looking at her chair. His gaze was fixed on her eyes, curious and real. They talked for nearly an hour. He told her about his passion for taking old, discarded wood and giving it new life. She found herself opening up like she never had, talking about art, history, and poetry. She was so caught up in being Bella with him, she almost forgot she was Isabelle. He walked her to the exit and asked her out. He suggested a coffee shop down the street, with terrible coffee but surprisingly good scones. She agreed. As she wheeled herself home, a strange, unfamiliar feeling fluttered in her chest. It was dangerous and terrifying. It was hope. Weeks turned into months. Isabelle's connection with Leo grew deeper, but so did the weight of her lie. Their relationship was built on simple pleasures, like slow strolls through the park, where Leo naturally matched his pace to hers. He took her to his workshop, a beautiful, chaotic space that smelled of pine, and showed her a rocking chair he was restoring, his hands moving over the wood with a reverence she found captivating. He never treated her like she was fragile. At the movies, he simply pulled up a chair beside her, shared their popcorn, and whispered jokes in her ear. He was falling in love with her mind, her wit, and her laugh. And she was falling in love with his kindness, his integrity, and the gentle way he saw the world. One evening, he noticed she struggled to get her chair over the small lip at her doorway. The next day, he showed up with a small, perfectly crafted wooden ramp he had whipped up to make things easier. It was the most thoughtful gift she had ever received, and it was a gift for Bella, not Isabelle. The guilt became a constant knot in her stomach. Clara called, her voice full of worry, pleading with Isabelle to tell him the truth. Isabelle confessed her terror, convinced Leo would hate her, that he would hate Isabelle Lancaster. But Clara insisted he was falling for the real her laugh, her thoughts. She warned that the longer Isabelle waited, the more she was betraying him. Isabelle knew Clara was right. The lie was a poison. She decided she would tell him, planning to confess everything that Friday night and pray that the man who had shown her such kindness could find a way to forgive her. Friday night arrived with a heavy sense of dread. The apartment was filled with the smell of Leo's favorite pasta sauce. Her hands trembled as she set the table. This was the last supper of Bella and Leo. Leo arrived, his face beaming, holding a single, lopsided daisy he'd picked from a crack in the sidewalk. He said it made him think of her, resilient. The words were a knife to her heart. She took a deep breath, beginning to speak. "Leo, we need to talk." But he stopped her, saying he wanted to go first. He knelt in front of her, just like he had in the library, and took her hand. His voice thick with emotion, he told her that from the moment they met, she had changed his world. He called her the kindest, smartest, funniest person he had ever known. He said he didn't care about the past or any challenges, he just cared about her. Then he said the words, "I love you, Bella. I love you more than I have words for." Tears streamed down Isabelle's face, tears of love and absolute agony. This was her dream and her nightmare all at once. He truly loved her, and he was saying it to a ghost. As she choked back a sob, a stack of plates crashed in the kitchen. Driven by pure instinct, Isabelle shot up from her wheelchair and lunged, catching the top plate just before it hit the floor. The sound of the other plates shattering was nothing compared to the deafening silence that followed. She stood there, frozen, the plate trembling in her hands. Slowly she turned to face him. The look on Isabelle's face was not anger or shock. It was a deep, soul-crushing confusion, followed by the slow, dawning horror of betrayal. He looked from her standing legs to the empty wheelchair and then back to her face. He whispered, the words hanging heavy and sharp in the air. "You can walk." She pleaded, "Leo, I can explain. Please, just let me explain." He let out a short, hollow laugh. "Explain what? That our entire relationship, everything, has been a lie?" His voice cracked, the kindness in his eyes gone, replaced by a deep hurt. "Who are you?" Her own name came out like a curse. My name is Isabelle." The truth was out, and in that moment she watched the man she loved look at her like a complete stranger. Leo didn't shout. The quietness of his hurt was so much worse. He told her how he had built her a ramp, rearranged his workshop, and researched accessible hiking trails, all because he loved her and wanted to be part of her world, a world he now realized wasn't real. He asked, his voice breaking, "Was I just some part of your sick experiment?" She cried that it wasn't true, that meeting him made everything real for her. But he was unconvinced. He said you can't love someone when you aren't being yourself, that she didn't trust him enough to show him who she really was. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "The worst part is, I see you now, the real you, Isabelle, and I think I would have liked her very much, but I'll never know, because I only ever knew Bella, and she doesn't exist." And then he was gone. Isabelle finally let the plate drop, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like her heart. She collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, surrounded by the wreckage she had created. The days that followed were a gray blur. She returned to her penthouse, but the gilded cage felt more like a prison than ever. She had run her experiment to cure her loneliness, and ended up more alone than she had ever been. Isabelle had to disappear so Bella could live.
Now Bella was gone, and Isabelle didn't know who she was anymore. After weeks of sitting in her silent penthouse, she woke up and realized self-pity was a luxury she hadn't earned. Leo's words echoed in her mind. He was right. She started by being honest with herself. She took control of her family's foundation, which had been mostly a tax write-off, and gave it a new mission. She started a grant program for small businesses and artisans like Leo. Then she launched a major initiative called Access for All, dedicated to funding accessibility projects in public spaces. She used her own painful, albeit fake, experiences to inform the project. She did most of it anonymously. For the first time, her life had purpose. A few months later, she wrote a 20-page letter to Leo. She didn't make excuses or ask for forgiveness. She just told him everything, the loneliness, the desperate idea, and how meeting him had been the only real thing in her life. She ended it by writing, "You deserve a love built on truth, and I am so sorry I wasn't strong enough to give you that." She sent it to his workshop with no return address. One Saturday afternoon, Isabelle was at a groundbreaking for a new, fully accessible community garden her foundation was funding. She was in the small crowd, dressed in jeans and a sweater. As the speeches ended, she felt someone next to her. She turned, and her heart stopped. It was Leo. He looked the same, but there was a guardedness in his kind eyes. "I got your letter," he said. An awkward silence stretched between them. "I meant every word," she said. "I'm so sorry." He gestured to the community garden plans. "This is a good thing you're doing, a real thing." "I'm trying," she replied. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since that terrible night. He wasn't seeing Bella or the heiress. He was seeing the woman in front of him, the one who made a terrible mistake but was trying to build something good from the wreckage. He spoke first. "My name is Leo. I'm a carpenter." Isabelle's eyes filled with hopeful tears. A small, tentative smile touched her lips. "My name is Isabelle. It's nice to meet you." It wasn't a magical fix. The hurt was still there, a scar on both their hearts. But as they stood there, two people meeting for the first time all over again, there was a flicker of a new possibility, a beginning built not on a desperate lie, but on a difficult, hard-won truth. Isabelle went looking for a love that was real, but she used a lie to find it. In the end, she learned the most important lesson of all. Before you can find a love that's true, you first need to be true to yourself. Only by being honest about who she was, flaws and all, could she ever hope to receive the love she so desperately craved. What would you have done in her situation? Do you think Leo should have forgiven her? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think.